So welcome everybody. My name is Brandon McGuire and I'm joining you from City Hall, which is why I am masked up. And so we are just trying to observe our COVID safety protocol and social distancing. At the moment, social distancing for me is achievable because we do not have any in-person participants. I'm happy to see that several of our community members were able to join us by video over Zoom. So thank you very much for taking time out of your Saturday, a beautiful Saturday nonetheless, where I'm sure we'd all rather be outside, to join in this conversation, this very important conversation about the future of our police department. Just one note from myself, and then I'm going to turn it over to our consultant team. We've invited the members of our city commission, our community police review board, as well as our human relations commission, and several of our city staff, including our city manager and our director of equity and inclusion. And so I'll spare everybody the by name introductions, but I would like to just acknowledge that we have several members of those boards and commissions joining us today, and I'm very pleased that they've taken their time to engage in this listening session. I would like to note, for their own good and for the good of the community members participating, that the members of the commissions and the advisory boards who are with us are joining us as in a listening role. So they are not here to engage. This is not a city commission meeting where there normally may be a little bit of back and forth conversation. They are here as listeners. And so it is important that they maintain that role, especially from the consideration of public meeting law. So let's see. If we do have any person joining us here at City Hall, then I will use the raised hand function to indicate to the consultant team that we have somebody in line who would like to provide comment. Otherwise, anybody who is from the community participating on Zoom, feel free to also use that function as well to get yourself in line once it's time to start providing input. So I believe that is all of the housekeeping from me. I'm going to turn it over to Stu Gary, our lead consultant with Citygate Associates, and he has a few more topics to cover before we jump into it.
Good morning, everyone. Stuart Gary, the Public Safety Principal for Citygate Associates. Thank you for taking your very valuable time on an even more valuable, nice to outdoor Saturday, I hear, in Kansas. As a brief reminder for some of you that may not realize it, Lawrence engaged Citygate Associates to do a deep outside neutral review of their practices and their police department. This is a contemporary review of how the police department is organized, trained, and performing in both a data and listening-driven sense today. We're not an investigative body. We're not looking at issues 5, 10, 25 years ago. We are deeply turning Lawrence Police inside out. We need to compare what that data-driven and listening technical approach to the community's perceptions of Lawrence Police Department. And we're doing engagement and community listening in several steps. First of all, some of you may be aware there is a project website and an email account set up. Feel free to give us any additional written testimony, published documents you think we may ought to be aware of. So you can take written input. We've worked with the city and come up with a list of about 130 individual community, nonprofit, community-based, faith-based, academic-based, civic, county leadership that we're doing small group and listening with. This is the next step in the process, is to allow the public to come into an open forum and express their perceptions and their aspirations for Lawrence policing and social services allied to policing moving forward in Lawrence. So I want to remind everybody of that, and today is input. Today, we will not be discussing opinions, draft findings. We're still right in the thick of the research aspect of the project. So today, to allow Richard Ward and Lauren, who will introduce themselves next, the opportunity to actively listen to you. We're doing several things. We are recording this meeting. All of our interview sessions are being recorded and transcribed to text Every consultant on the team will be able to read every word of testimony received across all of these listening sessions, and we'll be folding those into the project. All of the listening received will also be summarized thematically at the end of the project report. What individuals said will not be cited by name. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Richard and Lauren, who will introduce themselves and talk about raising the hand and how we're going to manage the time in your input today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Stu. I hope everyone can hear me. Again, good morning or good afternoon out there in Lawrence. My pleasure to be here. I'm one of the Citygate consultants. I've been a police chief about half my 30-year career out here in California in 3 different agencies. And so then, of course, the national conversation on policing is very important, and it's already a part of many aspects of this project. This is a listening session, as Stu mentioned, is one of the ways that we are going to gather input from individuals, elected officials, community leaders, people that have had direct interaction or not with the police department there. We're going to kind of prompt and frame and foster your thinking with 4 questions, and I'll outline those in a moment. I want to give Dr. Lauren Brown an opportunity to introduce herself, but just to reinforce what Stu and Brandon said, we ask that you mute your mic. You're muted now. If you need to speak, raise your hand. We'll give you each 3 to 5 minutes. I'm gonna pose the 4 questions. We'll type those into the comments, and I think we can type those into the chat. And then we'll give you each 3 to 5 minutes, probably closer to 5, to speak. Raise your hand. You'll get a 1-minute warning, maybe about the 4-minute mark, give or take a few seconds, when we'll give you a warning that your time is nearly up, because we want to be fair to everyone so that everyone has equal time and everyone can speak given the time we have. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Lauren Brown, who's going to participate and ask questions or respond to questions as I will. Dr. Brown, please. I need to unmute you, huh? Are you muted? Oh.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Okay. So good afternoon. My name is Lauren Brown, and my career has been in social equity, justice, and serving underrepresented populations as a staff member, as a researcher, and as a college professor. And I'm glad to be here with you today.
Thank you. So here are the questions for all of us. Again, to kind of frame, foster your thinking. What are your service experiences that you've had with the Lawrence Police? Again, service experiences with Lawrence Police is 1. 2, the services you believe are essential services for the police department to provide. And I'll repeat any of these if you want me to repeat any portion or any question. Services, and thirdly, services and future programs. So now looking ahead at the future that need to be added to Lawrence or shifted to and or done in cooperation with other community-based groups. Let me repeat that. Services and future programs that need to be added to Lawrence or shifted to and or done in cooperation with other community groups. And then finally, the 4th question we have are aspirations for the future, kind of visioning in Lawrence to guide the department's continuous improvement and responsiveness to community expectations. So service experiences will be 1, the essential services are 2, services and future programs in conjunction with community groups are added to Lawrence PD, and then the aspirations for the future. Please raise your hand. I'll if I need to, I'll unmute the speakers in the order their hands are raised. 5 minutes, and we'll give you about a 4-minute warning. I think that's it. Any questions? Any comments so far? Please jump in. Make sure I have everybody here. We have 21 participants. Service experiences with the Lawrence Police. First question. Karen, let me unmute you. It says ask to unmute.
I have never had other than at weddings. I had a friend who married a police officer, so I've encountered police officers at weddings. I have law enforcement people in my family, but I have never had an encounter with a Lawrence police officer that was pleasant.
Mm.
And I'm talking about maybe a traffic stop. I'm talking about one time about 3 years ago, I was assaulted in the street, and the officers who responded, in addition to the ambulance and all of that, it's my impression. I think part of my question is it's one of demeanor. I understand that police officers are walking into situations where they don't know what's going on. But I mean, I was even one time knocked out of the way by a police officer with his shoulder. I was completely shocked. It was in the lobby of the hospital. So I understand that when police officers go to a call, they don't know what they're walking into. They don't know what's going to happen. So I get all of that. But my sense is that there is always an assumption of guilt. I mean, that's the impression that I get. And so kind of two comments I would like to make is, one, educating the public about, okay, if you have to encounter a police officer, whether it's a routine, your tail light was broken, or you were robbing a bank, or whatever it might be, is what should what should people of the public expect from the police officer, so that they have some education about, so that the people have some education about, okay, when he comes to my window or my presence or whatever, I know that he's going to be, because you always see them, the minute, like one time this was in another city, but like I called a policeman to come to my home after I was robbed. And, when he walked in my door, he unbuckled his gun. So I guess it's so to what to expect. But then my other concern is training of police officers so they can do their job, yet the public doesn't feel like you're immediately considered guilty, you're immediately assaulted with what appears to be a chip on their shoulder, or a grudge, or just a negative connotation. And those are two of the big concerns I have, I think.
You got about, one more minute, Ms. Troutman, but so if you have any other comments, please let us know.
No, I've just been kind of shocked because, for instance, my family used to drive, when my kids were little, my family drove a red Honda, and we got stopped far more often, we felt like, because we were driving a red car. A few years ago, I was out of work, and in my 60s, I was delivering pizza. And it was interesting to, a couple of times I got stopped by an officer for whatever. And there was an immediate attitude until they realized they were talking to an old lady and not an 18-year-old kid. And to me, there should be no difference in their response. So, while I want to support them, I also question their training.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Any others? Any other comments? I don't see any hands raised. Please, if you know how to use that function, raise your hand, and I should see it. Any other comments so far? Thank you, Ms. Troutman. Those are good. I've taken some notes too. Any others so far? I see Mr. Watts. Give me a second, Mr. Watts. I will get you right. Looking at these names. Okay. Ask to unmute. You should be good, Mr. Watts, I think. Go ahead, sir.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. My experience essentially with the Lawrence Police Center around where I live, which is a heavily trafficked and very parked area. Edge Hill Road, where I reside, is essentially a public parking zone. Hence, I have to call the police to come and ticket the vehicles in order to get in and out of where I live, as well as to create a safe space. Sometimes it works quite well. In fact, it had worked quite well for an extended period of time, but then something started happening within the last year and a half when there were, I believe, efforts made to try to say, well, if we slow response time, the city will be compelled to give us some more staff, because that seems to be always the situation. But irrespective, when they do come out, and I have had an occasion to interact with the officers that write the tickets, I might ask a name. They don't like to give their name. I don't understand that. And when they do give their name, more often than not, they say it so quickly and so slurredly, it's impossible to understand what they're saying. Maybe that's because I'm an old man and my hearing is impacted. I don't think so, though. In June of 2020, there was an article in the Lawrence Journal World with respect to this very issue. I have sent a question in to Citygate, and I'm going to read it now. Why is there no departmental policy which requires police to provide the names and identification numbers clearly, slowly, and in a manner a citizen can hear, understand, and be able to spell the name? And to do so until the person asking has the data. The question is generated by a Lawrence Journal World quote. And this comes from a supervisor in our police department, where even more and more, they're junior lawyers. They're listening to Tony Wheeler. The sergeant stated, and I quote, "There's no Kansas statute or federal law that says law enforcement officers must provide their names and badge numbers upon demand." What kind of bullshit is that? Trying to play behind, oh, the law doesn't say we have to do it. So if they're not willing to give their name, that just starts it off. I'm done on this one.
Mr. Watts, we're going to jump to other speakers. So you still have about 2.5 minutes. I would.
Are you talking about all 4 points are in these 5 minutes?
Yes, sir. Be given our limited time, but it doesn't mean you won't have another opportunity to participate in another meeting.
What a bunch of shit. There's only 21 people here, sir, and we got 2 hours to do this. Anyway, Lawrence citizens would be supportive of the Lawrence Police Department making radical changes. For example, meeting the challenge of a system like London, where 90% of officers are unarmed, and the history of policing was founded in 1820 on the principle of policing by consent rather than force. This was a conclusion of the 2017 internal report, consultant group, just like you guys, which was buried by the Allegro people. The training, which Ms. Troutman was talking about, we have got to stop. The clock is ticking. buying into David Grossman's bulletproof mind. This guy is a jerk. I mean, he plays like he's an airborne ranger. He had ranger training, but he never was a ranger. He doesn't have a combat infantryman's badge. He's never been in combat. How the hell does he know about this? This guy goes on and on and on about, this is a quote from the trainer that we bring into our town, or we send our guys to go train. This is a quote from Grossman. If you have no capacity for violence, then you are a healthy, productive citizen, a sheep. If you have a capacity for violence and no empathy for your fellow citizens, then you have defined an aggressive sociopath, a wolf. But what if you have a capacity for violence and a deep love for your fellow citizens? Then you're a sheepdog, a warrior, someone who is walking the hero's path, someone who can walk into the heart of darkness. Oh my goodness. I don't need these guys walking around the street with M16 rifles.
I'll give you about 1 more minute, Mr. Watson.
Okay, that's where the use of force policy. Lexipol, bad organization, no good. I have submitted a model use of force policy from the Campaign Zero folks that addresses everything we want. You guys, you police people call a chokehold a respiratory restraint. And in our policy in Lawrence, they can do whatever they want. The use of a respiratory restraint is limited to circumstances where deadly force is authorized. Well, that ain't what the Campaign Zero policy is. The Campaign Zero policy is neck holds prohibited. See, they're not using fancy words. Law enforcement officers shall not use chokeholds, strangleholds, lateral vascular neck restraints, carotid restraints, chest compressions, none of it. We want you to see that in our policy. You got 2 hours to do this, sir.
Okay.
We don't want to waste the time, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Watts. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. I really do. Any others? Any other hands up for the 4 questions? And if you need me to repeat a question, I'll do that. I don't see any hands up here so far. I don't have any audio reflected for Michelle Wentling. I'm sorry, I don't know how to fix that. Comments on the questions, the 4 questions, please. I see Stephanie L. Thank you. Hold on. I'm asking you, Stephanie, to unmute is what it's giving me instructions to do. I'll try that again. I think you'll need to unmute once I send you the request. Nope, I can't see. I don't know, Stephanie, if you can unmute on your end.
Hey, Richard, this is Stephanie. I didn't raise my hand, so.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Just so you don't keep asking.
Oh. Okay, any other comments? I'll get to you. Let's see. I see Steven's asking to come in again. Give me. Let's have some others speak, Mr. Watts, and we'll see if there's possibly some time toward the end. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure everyone has equal time. Comments again. Questions. So let me repeat. So the four issues are service experiences, services you believe are essential. There should be some comments, I would think, on that one. Services and future programs that need to be added to Lawrence or shifted to and or done in cooperation with other community-based groups. We've received a lot of feedback on those two. And then aspirations for the future. And we got good comments from Ms. Troutman and Mr. Watts on those, talking about the future and some potential policy changes. I see Ms. Troutman again. Give me, let's see if there's any other people that have comments, questions. Stephen, how about Stephen, I give you a couple more minutes here. Is that okay? And then I'll go to Ms. Troutman. Give me a second to unmute you. I think, Stephen, you're good to go.
Yeah, I appreciate the time. The interesting aspect of this is I want to have a dialogue about why Lexipol is chosen as a writer of police policy for this middle of nowhere flyover hick college town. And as a fourth generation Lawrencian, I'll say where the hell I want about this place. I like it being a hick college town. It is not Chicago. I happen to went to high school. But anyway, I would like to talk with the police people. You, Mr. Word, do you support the banning of chokeholds? That's a yes or a no question. If you don't support it, how can you opine on it and say it's bad? You're a group of police consultants, all of you employed as police people currently. Do you believe in releasing your ability to choke people to death for our town, please? That's just the first question. Is it possible to get a dialogue on this, Richard?
Well, no, this is simply, Mr. Watts, a listening session. I'm not opposed. I love dialogue. Trust me. I wish I was there. I'd sit down and talk to you for hours. But I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity.
But it's like a yes or no question, man. I mean, we got to start somewhere. And if the police consultant group does not buy in to the 8 Can't Wait movement, which is a part of the Campaign Zero project, we can't get anywhere. It's a closed game. Brandon McGuire has seen to it that only special people get to do that. I mean, you just keep going on that, since groups that are handpicked by the powerful, such as Lawrence's Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, serve as mere smoke screens, worse than doing nothing with respect to police brutality, the public is weary of having its time wasted and knowledge ignored as it drafts up wish lists of recommendations, which is what we're doing now, while law enforcement abuse continues unabated. Even if it were to happen, where presence of everyone at the meeting table does not democratize entrenched power relationships or change systems of power. Thank you.
Mr. Watts, thank you. I'm going to unmute Ms. Troutman again, and then if there's any others that wish to participate.
Oh, thanks.
Hi, Ms. Troutman.
I appreciated you reviewing the 4 questions because I hadn't really been thinking about that. I had taught an employment class for several months at the jail, and which was I thoroughly enjoyed. But what was incredibly moving to me, and I happened to be friends with someone who was a jail warden, and I realized this is not about jails, it's about the police. But I was dumbfounded at how many of the young men, because I only taught men, the young men in my classes were in my opinion, were desperately uneducated, desperately uninformed about the world, the number of them that had no fathers, and I'm sure I'm mentioning things, Lauren, and you, that this is not new information to you. But I guess when I think of the future of the Lawrence Police Force is, I would hope, and this kind of goes back to what I said earlier, but I would hope that there is, policemen are not therapists, but I would hope that there is ongoing, well, number one, that people who are allowed to enter the academy or whatever are thoroughly vetted for the right temperament, and that there's a lot of emotional and psychological and those kinds of things that are put in. It's I used to be in HR, and the very first thing, the most important thing about employees is to make a good hire. And so I want the department to really invest in that. But I also hope that, that some of what you're doing now is going to result in ongoing training for police officers, because particularly in a town like Lawrence, where you're dealing with students who come from all over the state and country, you're dealing with PhD people, you're dealing with minorities, you're dealing with
Oops. I didn't mean to stop you. I'm sorry. I was trying to hold on, Ms. Troutman. I want you to finish.
Okay.
I want you to, I'll give you about 30 seconds, okay? Because
okay.
I want to get
it's just about making sure that policemen are able to identify when they go to a person, that they have some kind of training, that they're able to sort of read the situation, and that it's not all about law enforcement, that there's also an ability to, I guess, read the situation. I don't know how else to say that exactly.
I got it. Thank you. That's good. Good feedback. I appreciate that. Any other comments, questions? Again, service experiences, essential services. Are there essential services that you believe must remain with the Lawrence Police Department? Are there potential partnerships that you see with community-based groups, either existing ones or maybe the launching of new ones that should be in partnership with the department? And then the future. The future's key. I mean, looking ahead at some aspirations, kind of looking at the vision. That's another one. Any other comments? Questions? I don't see. No. Give me 1 second. I have a new and someone new to admit. We'll do that. It's another reason why we're trying to control time, because new people are being admitted into the meeting, as we would any public meeting. Hello, Ms. Haswood. Stephen, I'll give you some more time. I'll give you a few more minutes. If you're still interested, let's see. Let me find you. Hold on, Mr. Watts. You should be good to go, Mr. Watts, if you unmute on your end. You there?
I appreciate the time. I'm envisioning a social service department for our town that includes the police department. That is to say, the police department is part of the social services department and answers to more than one entity. There is no reason that we don't have the money to do that in this town. There really isn't. Our community development block grant monies have been gutted for holier than thou sacred cows that have existed in this community for nigh on to 50 years, which is when I started counting. Actually 51 now. It was 1970 is when I start counting. And we have the opportunity to build, see, this is part of Lawrence now, Richard, a world-class police department that we can use and win a Nobel Peace Prize about. I'm being a little facetious about that, but I do believe that we can create a social services department in this community that can take care of our unhoused individuals and our unfed individuals and our mentally ill individuals. At the same time, we provide protection for everybody else. Less than 4% of cop time is spent messing up people, violent crimes and this, that, and the other. It just doesn't happen that much. And yet, for the last 100 years, the United States of America has given more and more and more power to people to beat up other people. And that's what's been going on, to beat up people. It just doesn't exist here in Lawrence, Richard. It hasn't. It never has, except our segregation. Now, that's a whole other story, but we're not going to talk about that today. So for the future, I see building a department that is part of the community, not separated. I was just over at the police department the other day picking up the free chairs that they're giving away because of a $20 million castle that we built. And, it was impressed upon me that they're a family and that they do things differently. But then we figured out I've seen more dead bodies in foster care than most police people have. Yeah, as a foster care administrator, as a child abuse administrator, I've seen more dead bodies than I care to count. Irrespective, there's a way to do this, Richard, and it doesn't center around cops having guns and billy clubs beating the shit out of people. I'm done on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great comments. Any other comments around, for the sake of those who may not have heard my questions? There are four key themes, four key topics. Some of your service experiences with the Lawrence PD, the services you believe are essential for Lawrence PD to provide, services and future programs that need to be added to Lawrence PD or shifted to and or done in cooperation with other community-based groups. And then fourthly, the aspirations for the future of policing in Lawrence to guide the department's continuous improvement and responsiveness to community expectations. And so you can draw, of course, from your own experience outside of law enforcement in that regard that might apply to the work of Lawrence PD. So please, if you have those experiences, we'd love to hear about how they might apply to policing in Lawrence too. That's key. It's very important. You need not be a public safety expert to, of course, opine on policing in Lawrence. Making sure. So heard from Mr. Watts twice. Brandon, I see you, sir. Hold on. Brandon McGuire. I'm going to.
Thank you, Rich. I just wanted to point out for the good of the group and for your own good, because it may be easier for me to keep track from my perspective. It does appear we have about 5 other members of the public with us. Oh. Their cameras are not on, and obviously everybody is muted by default. But just as a reminder to everybody, you can raise your hand using the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And if you click on that, it'll bring up a menu, and front and center in that menu is an option to raise your hand. And so I just wanted to remind everybody that's how you do that. For any other members of the public who are with us and would like to provide comments on this discussion framework.
Thank you, Brandon. It's good. I missed that. comments about the 4 topics to foster thinking, not to limit your thinking, please? No comment on the aspirations for the future about Lawrence? Here's Sherilyn. I'm going to ask to unmute Sherilyn. Sherilyn W., you should be good to go there. Can you hear us?
Mr. Watts was talking about his idea about social services and the homeless, which has been a big issue here lately in Lawrence. And the city commission at one point passed ordinances about the homeless, about where they could sit or lie, stand, because people were concerned about what they were doing or not doing. And I think sometimes we have asked the police to do kind of our dirty work. There isn't enough places for people that are homeless to stay, but we kind of ask the police to chase people around to nowhere. And then we kind of blame them for doing what they were asked to do. I have felt like some of the police were really concerned about homeless people and were didn't know what, they don't know what to do. They're not trained for that. We've asked the police to do a lot of things, which I feel like other aspects of society should be taken care of. I have heard sometimes the police were not so kindly to our homeless citizens, but what do you exactly expect the police to do if there's no, and you've passed an ordinance about where they can, what they can do. I guess that the city commission now has kind of reversed these ordinances. But the police are also expected to do crisis intervention for the mentally ill to some extent. That goes on quite a lot. Quite a lot of the police calls here really from what I can tell, really have nothing to do with what most people call crime. A lot of it is welfare checks, domestic violence, people lying here and there in the street that someone are concerned about that, about their welfare, that are sleeping in parking garages, lying alongside the road, lying in front of a building, or trespassing into some business because people don't have any place to go. And it seems like we ought to be focusing on what people can do about some of this rather than having the police just chase people around and around to nothing. So that would be my feedback about it. But I felt like some of the police seemed very concerned about people's welfare at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherilyn. Thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback. Good feedback. Any other comments in that regard? Are the police being asked to do what they're not trained to do? Are they being asked to around mental health, dealing with the unhoused? Is that a concern for you in Lawrence? And maybe you have some ideas as to future programs in that regard that might help the police department, might take that burden off them and apply it to another agency better trained. Oh, I see you, Ms. Troutman. Let me see if there's others that want to weigh in. Ms. Haswood, I'm going to give you time. Let me unmute you here. Give me a second.
Thank you. My name is Christina Haswood. I serve on the Human Relations Commission for the City of Lawrence. I'm also a state representative for the Kansas House of District 10. I was on this last week, and I remember Lauren Brown. So I wasn't too sure if I was supposed to be on this week, but I'm glad to sit down and hear this conversation. What comes to my mind is the type of people's background that go into the police workforce, and how there's no like universal or national data tracking system. If they do something bad in another state in their police department or enforcement, how well is our background checking for that, and to have red flags for somebody who might not be suitable enough or emotionally capable of having them in our Lawrence Police Department workforce. I'm also thinking of people who come from a military background and may have PTSD and don't have the specific resources to fully help their mental health services in that way, and then that transparents into their like police brutality and racial discrimination, but also the unconscious bias too. I think issues like that too are something that we can all work on as leadership, but I think that also contributes to a lot of why some people in the police force might do something that is racist or really harming our community more than doing good. Thank you.
That's good. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Good comments again. Let me any other, I see you, Mr. Watts, again. We do have your written comments too, Mr. Watts. And so if you have anything else to add beyond your written comments, we do have your written comments. Any other comments? And in response to those just provided, it's really good. Ms. Haswood's comments were around universal tracking for officers so they don't leave with some horrible baggage and then they come out here to Lawrence or to some other agency when they probably shouldn't be in policing. PTSD, it's a great concern about those leaving the military, working as police officers on our streets. And then the unconscious bias, of course, that's been a big issue across the country, implicit unconscious bias. Great comments there. We appreciate those. Any other comments, questions on those fronts? Hold on, Mr. Watts and Ms. Troutman. I haven't forgotten your hands. I see your hands. I want to draw some other voices out. So we really want this to hear from the diversity of Lawrence. And that's really our goal as a consulting team. Again, the service experiences, services that are essential. I haven't heard that yet, so that would be a great point, great question to respond to. Services and future programs, aspirations for the future. Think about those and let me know if you have any thoughts. Let us know. Stephen, if you have something to add, how about I give you another minute and then I'll give Ms. Troutman another minute and then we'll see if there's others. Hold on one second, Mr. Watts. Let me do that.
I appreciate the effort, Richard, in tagging onto what Representative Haswood began to touch upon, and that has to do with local recruitment efforts. The Allegro study showed that the 2017 Allegro study, which I sent you a copy of, Citygate, a copy of, underscores the recruitment process. The recruitment process at that time, and I don't believe it's changed, centered around referrals from other Lawrence police people, Craigslist, Indeed, or something like that, pretty restrictive. My suggestion is that we open it up to the United States of America because of this past summer and what went on. I believe that there are police people all over the country that would love to come to Lawrence, Kansas and relocate their profession and begin anew instead of being in Baltimore or Atlanta or, wherever. I personally have been in Chicago many times. Man, you can go to the cops there and talk bull all day long. They don't threaten you or anything. It's not like what people say. And I tell them about Lawrence, and I tell them about the pay and the the crime issues here. I would like to see a recruitment effort that includes bringing in the best and the brightest across the United States into our community, since we have such a dearth of applicants.
It's great.
We have the highest paid administrative police team in the state of Kansas, Richard. The highest paid administrators for local policing.
Wow.
We can bring that down to the raw recruits. But anyway, it's just an idea that we can expand, and we need to not be so insular and incestuous. We have our own training mechanism. Lawrence has its own training academy instead of sending people to the state academy. It's incestuous. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Good comments. Good comments about hiring, not just limiting your recruitment efforts locally. I'm not suggesting that Lawrence does that, but that's always good to look beyond your local community to see if you can't bring in some of the better and the brightest folks. Good stuff. Ms. Troutman, I'm going to unmute you here, or it's asking me if you should be good there.
I just wanted to kind of react a little bit to what Stephen, Christina, and Cheryl had said, and I ditto on the recruitment thing. But a few years ago, I was delivering Domino's Pizza, and there's a certain trailer park in town that is known not to be the best. Anyway, I had delivered a pizza 2 or 3 times to this same address. And I was very concerned about the teenage girl who was answering the door, that it was a hoarder situation. And I just had some social welfare concerns. And so when I got back in my car, I called the police at the regular number and asked. Anyway, basically, I was told that all they could do was go do a welfare check, and which I guess is just knocking on the door and saying, is everything okay? And while I completely agree with Sherilyn that I think it kind of speaks to what do we want from our police? Are we asking the police to do things that really aren't in their bailiwick? Mm-hmm. I love the idea of the police department being part of a greater social services department, and that while you don't want to make obviously assumptions or whatever about people, that it was dismaying to me that this had to stop there. I mean, you watch Dr. Phil and you see stories of kids being in a house, and the police are helpless to do anything. And I realize we have to weigh our freedoms against what's right. But it was surprising to me that the police, sometimes there's so little they can do. And as part of what you all are doing, and as part of a community discussion, is how can we make our police more useful in addressing the needs of our community? I guess that's really all I wanted to mention.
No, that's a great question. We may add that question to our 4. How can we make
okay.
Right? Very good. Thank you for that. How can we make the police more useful to Lawrence? Very good question. I love it. Any other comments? I think you've heard from Mr. Watts, Ms. Troutman, Ms. Haswood. Good stuff. We appreciate every comment, question. Any other comments or questions? Again, we can venture outside the 4 areas within our scope. If you have something relevant, again, to Lawrence PD and its future, its programs today, and potentially partnerships, I think are important. Let's see. I'm tempted to call on some people, but I better not. I'll start something. Anything else? Anyone else? Brandon or Dr. Brown? Stu? Any questions that I've missed? Comments I've missed? Hold on, Stu. I'm sorry. Let me find you. You should be good, Stu.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for participating. I know we have some members of the public listening, not commenting, and that's to be appreciated. The way you offer input to a project like this can be at times very personal, very, very difficult, but it can also be tremendously growing to your community and your sense of participation in community. I want to remind those of you that perhaps are listening, but not raising your hand, feel free to email us at the email address of the project. You can send any and all attachments, national studies. For example, Mr. Watts has sent us multiple emails, multiple well-researched issues, and other published studies that we're aware of. This project is also being done in the time and context of other communities releasing their studies, several just in the last week across the nation, about what the next evolution of policing and taking care of society in America looks like. We're cognizant of every one of those, and our research will be looking at those in comparison to what Lawrence is telling us it needs from its policing and social community services. We're hearing things today consistent with other testifiers. We're hearing things consistent with what we're finding in writing. I'd like to also say the reason why we're not jumping out and taking a fixed yes/no position, we've been doing this a long time. And we think it's best to come out with a draft project report that incorporates all of the elements of the good and the bad and must be done differently in context. And you can tend to be polarizing if you come out and say a firm yes, no on one thing very early. The city deeply vetted us. They know our values and research techniques. And we've promised the city a fair, impartial 360 review. And I think it helps all the stakeholders who need to listen and accept change to see the change initiatives and context of the research and the public perceptions. So it may seem that it's easy to jump out and say yes or no on something right now. We have broad beliefs. We believe in evolving and changing policing and caring services in America, or we wouldn't be doing this work. So I'd ask a little bit of patience. We're still in the research listening phase of the project. When the full draft report is given in public to the commission will certainly exercise its options to socialize findings and recommendations and fiscal priorities with the community. The other stakeholders in the community, other allied agencies, both private, nonprofit, as well as government, state, the county, have all been very open in their aspirations for changing services and improving the quality of life in Lawrence. So I heard a lot of positives today, and whether you choose to speak today or submit email written comments, there is another public session scheduled this coming Thursday. We can also do surveys on using the Lawrence Listen tools. We take note of the recent Police Review Board Commission Lawrence Listen survey. We've already have a tremendous amount of both written and quantifiable input as that survey goes on. So it may be some of you are more comfortable with answering some survey questions on Lawrence Listens as draft findings and recommendations come out. So all of those tools Lawrence is very, very good at, and we're just not to that point in the project today. With that, are there any other comments? Rich and I see Stephen's hands up. Anybody else other than Stephen at the moment? Please, if so, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I think what we'll do, both Brandon, Richard, and Lauren, is after Stephen offers some additional comments, if there's no more hands forthcoming, just out of respect of everyone's time on a Saturday afternoon, who just wanted to listen to their community. I think we end this session, continue to market the Thursday session, and we go from there on other public input. Thank you.
Thanks, Stu. Mr. Watts, I'm going to get you back in here for a few minutes. Give me a second.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gary, could you fix your website, please? If you search for Lawrence, Kansas, you can't find it. You have to have the individual link in order to, well, as an example, get to the Lawrence, Kansas webpage. I don't remember this stuff, so I go to the webpage and I put in Lawrence, and at the Citygate site now, it doesn't know anything about it. It would just make it easy for people to find it. I don't think that they necessarily will. Mr. Gary, you indicated that you were well vetted. I don't buy that, to be blunt, but it doesn't matter. You're already here. I've been here and be patient for 50 years, and I'm a white guy. I'm tired of being patient. It doesn't make any sense. The stuff that I've asked to have done. Anyway, I know how to speak really softly too. I've been trained as a social worker, and I went through the Manger Foundation. I found that you can put people to sleep when you do this. And you can use words like evolve into a fine institution. What does that mean? It's all good. The fact that you will not say that you support Lexipol as the primary writer, and that's what it all comes down to. Who writes the policies? I appreciate the time this will take up on Thursday. And by the way, I suggest that when you get city managers and city people that are in here, which most of this is, have them put a little flower next to their name, and then you'll know as you look at it, well, that guy ain't gonna say anything. He's getting $150,000 a year to sit in here and listen to this shit. Excuse me. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Any other comments before we close? Closing comments. Great comments. We appreciate every comment and your participation, your time, very valuable. I know the city manager's office, our consulting team, we greatly appreciate your participation. Ms. Troutman, I'll give you, and let me go to Sherilyn. Hold on. We're not done yet. Sherilyn, I'll go to you. Let me see if you're...
Okay. I mean, I would like to say something. Of course, I guess my issues all around the same thing, because despite the fact that we sheltered hundreds of people in Lawrence, Kansas during this cold snap, it's my understanding that 3 people still died.
Mm-hmm.
And because the whole situation has gotten so out of control in Lawrence, nobody even knows how many homeless people are here. And some resources from someplace has got to go somewhere to stop this. It's been going on in Lawrence for a long time, and I don't think they need the police. The police cannot take care of this. I was just stunned because we sheltered hundreds of people and still we had people die. It's just some resources from somewhere have got to go some other place because this is not working. And that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me admit Ms. Troutman again.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is I really appreciate that you're doing this. I am so glad I noticed it and signed up this morning. I really, really wish that the whole group would, I can understand that some people just want to tune in and listen, but I would really appreciate hearing more conversation, hearing more comments. Because I get sick of hearing my voice, and everyone has a worthwhile contribution to make to this, and I just feel very, very strongly that we must have a lot of input from all kinds of people who have had all kinds of experiences so that we really take advantage of this opportunity. And as Mr. Watts or Sherilyn or somebody, or maybe it was Christina said, that we really end up with a first-class organization that really is, people look to Lawrence, Kansas and say, that's what we want ours to be like. That's a successful police force and or organization. And that's what I'm really excited about, seeing how this all goes. And I encourage everybody who's here who hasn't commented to please feel free to, put your 2 cents in. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Troutman. Again, thank you all for participating. We're going to close and conclude this public meeting. Again, as Stuart, my colleague, said earlier, we do have a meeting Thursday, another public forum like this. So if you have additional comments, new comments, we're probably going to foster thinking with the same 4 questions. But again, if you have some additional comments, you can feel free to offer those this coming Thursday. You can submit those in writing. We're reviewing everything we get closely. That will be incorporated into our thinking, into our report. We sincerely appreciate your time, your attendance, your participation, your concern for Lawrence. It's good. I think it's good to see. And I'm sure, I would hope the police department appreciates the comments and the participation. So I'm going to conclude. I thank each of you again for your time. Don't forget Thursday. If you felt you couldn't get a comment out or you couldn't think of one, do that on Thursday. Again, thank you and have a good day and a good weekend. Be safe.